Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fast.Forward.Pride PODCAST.
Now, why Fast.Forward.Pride PODCAST? We feel that there's a desperate need for conversations that are not happening in our community.
Yeah.
And when we talk about our community, actually, we mean a lot of different things, right? Because we are from different generations.
Yes.
We come from different part of the world.
Yes.
And we understand our community in very different ways, through very different lenses. And what I felt when I first met you, Jason, and we'll do proper introductions in a second, but is that there's just so much that I don't know about my own history as a gay man.
Yeah.
But who are we? Before we go into our first conversation for this pilot episode, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
My name is Alessandro.
Yes.
My pronouns are he, him, and I am Italian of origin, a migrant to this beautiful country, the United Kingdom. I've lived in London for over 10 years now, but I was really shocked, I have to say, when I first met you and you started to tell me about your story and about the many stories that have influenced and inspired you. I was shocked about how little I knew about it. And I'll say one of those stories before I hand over to you, because that really set me off. And it was the story about Jeffrey Dudgeon.
Yes.
You would tell us a little bit more
Northern
about
Ireland.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
But the reason I mention this is because when we talk about LGBT rights and liberation, liberate the Pride movement, everyone thinks about Stonewall.
In New York City.
States,
Yeah.
New York City. And yet, as a European person, I didn't know that actually there was something a lot more significant that didn't happen in the States, but happened here and changed our history in Europe in terms of decriminalization. 1981. The Jeffrey Dudgeon case versus the United Kingdom at the European Court of Human Rights.
Yes.
Now, stuff like that, should be in history books, really, but should also be common knowledge, at least for gay men in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. We all know about Marsha P. Johnson. We all know about Silva Rivera. We all know about Lea de Longoria. Sorry, that's the wrong name. But we do have so much more information about the queer rights movement in North America and ignore what's been happening here in Europe. And the Jeffrey Dudgeon case is a prime example. And for me as an activist of 34 years, Jeffrey Dudgeon was one of the people that really informed me and inspired me to do the case that I'm doing now. And we'll talk a bit more about that case further down in this episode. But just to give a little bit about me, I'm Jason Jones. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago back in the 60s, and I've been an activist for over 34 years. And I think I'm most well known for taking Trinidad and Tobago to court to fight the British colonial buggery law. And again, this is part of history that I think a lot of the viewers will not know about, which is the buggery law that criminalized anal sex was created by Henry VIII in 1533. Again, this is the first anti-gay legislation in the history of the world, created here in Britain, and then spread across 3/4 of the planet through British colonialism. So when we sit here in Soho House in the centre of London, this was the centre of homophobia for over 500 years. And this is why it's so important, this podcast, and the message gets out to people, because I think we now have a huge disconnect between the global north and the global south on LGBTQ+ rights. And there's this idea that black people are more homophobic than white people, and what's going on in the global south does not impact on what's happening in the global north. So we need to have these very, very difficult conversations about race, about gender identity, about misogyny, patriarchy, all of these things that impact on queer rights. So that's what Alessandro and I are going to be talking about.
Yeah, and it sounds, something that should be so obvious, right? We should be having these conversations, but what we realized as activists in our own ways, and we navigate, different spaces of the LGBTQ+ community, especially in London, these conversations are not happening.
No.
And on top of that, we are very much separated into little bubbles.
Silos.
There's silos. There's a lot of infights within the community.
Well, the infighting happens because there aren't conversations like this happening.
Absolutely. And
I don't meet young queer people unless I go and seek them.
Yeah.
And young queer people's listening, of course, I grew up before the digital age. I grew up before the internet. So my activism is very specific from that age background. And, when a young queer person says, okay, boomer, instead of educating about what the digital age is and what activism looks like and what being queer in the digital age looks like, those are the conversations that need to happen. And for me as a queer elder, I want to pass on the baton. But we need to have the conversations about what baton are you passing on, how much of my activism is informing activism today, what was the history, and what are the mistakes that we encountered over the last decade that have now led to the trans civil war and the rollbacks that we're seeing. Why are these conversations not happening, Alessandro?
Well, I think because we haven't created the spaces for them. And, social media is a wonderful thing, but I think social media, again, creates an echo chamber.
Yes.
And often people from different generations, people from different parts of our LGBTQ plus community, they are only engaging with that part of the community. And what we're trying to do with this conversation is to break that divide.
Yes.
To break that divide, to talk across generations, across ethnicities, across some to some extent political beliefs, and we've got similar value systems, but we're very different people. And I want to hear the stories that have inspired you. I want to have that conversation with you, and I hope that the audience will find ways to some extent relate, but also we'll be left with questions.
Yes.
Because those are the questions that we need to talk about, that we need to ask ourselves. And this is hopefully going to be a very interactive series where, we very honestly and unscripted just have conversations that are helping us both progress and learn.
And you two can get into the conversation. We have an email address.
Absolutely. So we have same as the podcast, so Fast.Forward.Pride @gmail.com. Thank you, Google. Where we want to really hear about your stories, the questions you have, the conversations you think we're not having, and bring that in this space because we want to create a space for those conversations to happen. So to start from maybe just a little teaser, it would be great to know a little bit more about your story. Again, when we met, there were wonderful stories like you hanging out and singing with Nina Simone.
When I was 19.
When you were 19 and when she was in a lesbian relationship.
Well, people don't know this. Nina Simone was a queer woman. And when I met her, she was in a lesbian relationship in Trinidad. And, again, these are gaps in the history that we just don't recognize. And, when I met Nina Simone at 19, she was, of course, a very powerful voice in the black civil rights movement. So when I came to London in 1985, and then Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative government passed Section 28 in 1988, so I had the rug pulled out of me coming here for queer safety, and then have the rug pulled out from under me. It was a natural progression for me to understand black civil rights and queer civil rights. At that point, there wasn't queer civil rights in Britain at all. But, Stonewall was founded in 1988 out of Section 28. It was the start of queer rights in the UK. But of course, we go back to Geoffrey Dudgeon, who took the UK to court in 1981 and won decriminalization. So these essential figures that we just don't know about and don't talk about, I think this is what this podcast is going to bring to people. So I hope people follow us as we go on this exciting journey, especially with my court case, just so that people know. In 2017, I took Trinidad and Tobago to court to challenge the old British colonial buggery law. And in 2018, I won a landmark victory at the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago. That victory was then used to decriminalize over 80 million LGBTQ plus people around the world, most notably India. And that case has now been appealed by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and it will be heard at the Privy Council. Even though we're a republic, we still have the British Privy Council as our Supreme Court. That hearing will be heard next year with a judgment 2027. So I have another 2 years after the last 10 years that I've been doing this work. And that judgment will decriminalize over 45 million people. So, there's work happening, and there are things that need to be done. And I think that a lot of people in the queer community, both in the global north and global south, and from intersectional backgrounds, we don't talk about enough. Yeah. And we don't know enough about it.
Yeah. And the case of your case in the Privy Council, for me, is the perfect example because we've spoken to a lot of British people, especially white British people, and we mentioned your case, and people think about the Privy Council as this institution that is involved with the coronation, yes, it's a, old-fashioned thing, but they don't really think about the implications outside of the UK and outside of the tradition in a way, and realizing that they still hold so much power on other countries that are supposed to be independent, and all these things not even British people know about. No. They're not taught in history. They're not openly talked about. And for me, again, being part of the community here in the UK also means facing these difficult conversations about institutions that are they are protecting homophobia globally.
Well, British people think colonialism is done, but here we are fighting against the law that was created by Henry VIII that still criminalizes over half of the Commonwealth countries today. So we're talking about 34 countries, former colonies of Britain, that criminalize LGBTQ plus people using British laws. This is not no knowledge. And we have to take responsibility for this heinous history that the British colonizers spread across the planet. And not enough is being done. When you speak to the British government, I think they gave £5.8 million back in 2018 towards decrim case. I mean, £5.8 million is a drop in the budget, in the bucket. My case has cost £1 million. My one case. And I've raised all of that myself by knocking on doors here in the City of London. I'm very blessed. I'm privileged. I have light-skin passing privilege. I live in London, so I can knock on these doors and ask big business to help fund this case. But I've gotten no support from any LGBTQ plus organization globally. I've not gotten support from the British government. I do all of this on my own. I must say a big shout out, thank you to Soho House, who has been very supportive of my work, and we thank them for the space to do the podcast here in Soho House at 180 House. But, on the big scene, we're not doing the work. And when the podcast continues, we're going to be looking at where the mistakes have been made. And I think one of the big mistakes that we have made is assimilation politics. I think queer liberation in the global north has been, we're just like you, nothing to see here. I disagree completely. I'm happy being queer. I don't want to be seen the same as a straight person. I don't want children. I don't want marriage in the classic patriarchal, misogynistic idea of marriage. I think these are conversations that were ignored over the last 10 years. It's all been, let's be like straight people. I'm not like straight people. And I don't want to be like straight people. And straight people don't want us to be like them. They love queer culture. And we haven't embraced queer culture enough. And I think things like RuPaul's Drag Race and a lot of queer stuff that's coming into the mainstream now is now being identified as queer. Back when Sylvester was singing disco, we just thought, oh my God, look at this big, loud queen. But Sylvester changed the trajectory of disco music. And these are parts of history that are gaps in our knowledge and that we don't embrace as queer people. So I'm hoping this podcast will educate and entertain.
I love that. Well, in less than 15 minutes, we've managed to go from colonialism, racism, Nina Simone, RuPaul Drag Race, your court case, LGBT identity. I think that's exactly what we'll be trying to do in the next few episodes. Yeah. Again, hoping that we get also some insights and questions from the audience so that we can also interact with them in that way. Yes. But the point of it all is that there's so much to unpack. Yes. So much to unpack across the divide of ages and race and social mobility and all of it. we need to start having these conversations. We need to get out of our own bubbles, get out of our comfort zone, and talk about the things that are hard to talk about sometimes, especially when you're talking with someone that doesn't look exactly like you.
And also is very frustrated by the bubbles, and very frustrated that we don't have these platforms. So join us on the podcast. It's going to be going over the next couple of months, and we're going to have some special guests like Jeffrey Dudgeon and others who are going to be talking about their work and getting you to know that there's a much wider group of queer people out there that are doing amazing things. And it's not just about RuPaul's Drag Race. There's a lot more happening.
Although we love RuPaul. But anyway, that's it for today. If you've got any questions, Fast.Forward.Pride @gmail.com. And we hope to see you during the next episode.
Thanks a lot, guys.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, we have 3 seconds. Bye again.